Hello, good afternoon, LinkedIn. Welcome to one of our 2 summer webinars that we're hosting here through the nonprofit Hive. Super exciting to be talking about my favorite topic, community building. What does it look like? And very excited. I'm going to go through and introduce some of our panelists in a minute. But if you're joining us today, feel free to jump in.
We lost Tasha.
I think Tasha internet. Yeah.
Sorry. And then my own internet, as I was joking about earlier with these guys, goes completely out. Sorry about that, guys. As I was starting to say, where you're from, your role, your org, your country, love to hear where people are joining us from. And we're super fortunate today to have 3 Hive members, all from different corners of the globe, with us today talking about what community building looks like in their organization, but also in their experience. So we're going to start. Joana, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Joana. I come from Portugal, and I'm a grant writer with Sustainable Agriculture Network, which is a global impact network dedicated to achieving sustainability in our food system, specifically agriculture.
Amazing. Fantastic. Jared, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Jared Novoseller. I'm originally from the States, outside of Philadelphia, but currently live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I love that you refer to us as a corner of the world because we're really smack dab in the geographic center of North America. I'm the Director of Development for BGC Winnipeg, which is formerly Boys and Girls Clubs of Winnipeg. So we do stuff for youth, basically from age 6 to 18, and then we also do programming up to age 29. So
amazing.
Pretty fun.
Prathyush, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, Tasha. Thank you. I'm Prathyush, and I'm from Bangalore, India, and I'm currently heading corporate partnerships in UNI Trust in Bangalore. And UNI Trust is a volunteer-driven organization that's currently reaching 5,000 plus students with the help of our 5,000 plus volunteers. And what we do is we offer one-on-one mentorship for these children throughout the academic year, and helping them get from their first grade to their first job, right? Like anything they need in that regards, we support them with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great. Thanks to everyone who's throwing their names. See lots of Hive members there in the comment. Hello, everyone. So we're going to kick this off. If everybody in the comments has questions, our panelists are wonderful and said they're happy to kind of jump in on those in real time. So please feel free to feel as engaged as you would like to be in the conversation as well, and we'll pull those questions in. So I think we're going to just start off about what community looks like. And anybody who likes to read some of my ramblings on LinkedIn, I feel like the word community is a bit of a loaded word, and it can mean very different things according to how it's being used, how it's being cultivated at your nonprofit as well. So we're going to have all 3 of our panelists talk about just this question really of what does community mean in your work. So Prathyush, I'm going to have you start off for us.
Yeah, sure. Deborah is saying that I need to speak louder, so I'm hoping I'm more audible this time around. I think for me, the idea of community really changed as I started working in the social sector. I think for me, before that, it was more about, hey, people coming together, right? And at UNI, one of our co-founders keep stating this, right? Like a community without a cause is often just a mob, right? So that's the power of community that I was able to see as I joined the nonprofit sector and in my work at UNI Trust. And of course, I think I've seen community come into play with a lot of the work we do, right? Like we have in big, large letters all across our decks, a lot of the materials. It takes a village to raise a child. And that's what you're working towards as well, right? And of course, every single moment we've seen different people from the community step up and offer help in various areas a child might need help in. And that's how my understanding of community has evolved through my experience of working with children and observing volunteers that come in every week without miss and show up for the children that they so love and care about.
Wonderful. I love that little quote at the beginning. You said that's definitely going to appear in some sort of social media later for sure. That's great. Joana, community, how does it look like for your network, and what's your understanding of how it's evolving there?
Yeah, well, at Sustainable Agriculture Network, community really takes a very important role. As the name states, it's a network, a global impact network, dedicated specifically to achieving a common purpose. So the purpose really is at the center, and ultimately the organization has transitioned for a more transactional or technical based model that was focused on certification of practices of sustainable agriculture into an implementation of projects model. So our members, which are crucial and the arms of our implementation of the projects, are absolutely at the center of everything that we do. So this is what community really means for Sun and now for me.
That's awesome. Fantastic. And Jared, community-based work.
Well, we lost Tasha again. I guess I'll give her a sec. But for me, community is really one of those terms. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, guys. Please, I don't know what is happening. Just jump in if
It's the internet.
It's the internet. I have to go and talk to my children in a second. Please go ahead.
It's all good. I was just going to say, so to me, community really is, it's one of those, like, I think it actually needs to be communities, like it's a plurality, right? Because every space that I've been in where you think of like I was a teacher for the first part of my career, and you have a school community, but you have a classroom community, and you have, if people are on a team, you have a team community. There are schools within schools where I taught like business development kind of thing within my school. So there was like communities within communities within communities. And I found that in the kind of social, purpose work, that there's also communities within communities. So when I was in Atlanta, I know there's lots of folks in the States, they would talk about ITP and OTP. So inside the perimeter and outside the perimeter. And even within that one city, there were neighborhoods that were communities. The city was a community. So for me, it's something, there has to be something that binds, but a lot of times larger community is bound up in many little smaller communities. As we're waiting on Tasha, I don't know, does that guys resonate with you guys?
Sorry, guys, I'm back again. Apologies. My Chrome is just not happy, and I might have to switch over to something else. But apologies, Jared.
In a metaphorical sense, I mean, that's what happens in community too. We drop in, we reconnect. It's all part of like how that works, right? Like community is about having connections, and then sometimes they don't always connect as well as you'd like, right? So
they don't. This is
real-time metaphor in action.
Real-time.
And Jared stepped in for you, right? Like he took over. That's what communities do.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you all for being so kind, because I haven't had problems before. All right. Well, I can't respond, Jared, other than saying that thank you, and you're so wonderful to be so kind, and jump in on that. But my next,
you have to watch the recording.
I was going to say, we're not recording. It's not live here, everyone. So we're going to move over. Joana, the next question is, and you already started to talk about this. I'd love to hear a little bit more about this movement from a tech approach to this more, community focused approach, because I do see a lot of very technology based groups talking about community, and it's not the community that I often think of when I think of community, right? So how have you found your organization has kind of moved into this organic, community building approach?
Well, there was a certain transitioning period between Sun as a certification body and Sun as an impact network as it is nowadays. And really, the members are the crucial part of everything that we do. The organization itself is member-led. So all of the community is integrated into this logic based on their own principles of governance. The board is made up by the members of the organization. All the decisions are undertaken with this collaborative spirit, and it's really important to take into consideration collaboration, coordination, and then, of course, the need for contact, as we were discussing before. Yeah.
Love that. I love hearing about boards that are made up of members, because I think it is really, even when we were talking about, I mean, Jared's one of our Hive ambassadors. We just started for the Hive, our own advisory board. It's all people who have been involved, right? And know a little bit of what the vision is, have some understanding of what we're building. Because I think it's really hard to build strong communities that are led by people who don't necessarily know where you're headed. Jared, we're going to go over to you. Many nonprofits, and this is part of the question too, but they're structured a little bit like machines, and communities are ecosystems, right? Like they feel natural. So what does that look like at Boys and Girls Clubs of Winnipeg?
So I mean, I was just thinking, we also, like, our board has community members from it very intentionally. That collaboration that Joana spoke about is absolutely critical to having community. And I was thinking, actually just kind of jotted down, like, community to me is shared, right? Like, so it has to be shared. It's not owned. And a lot of times in nonprofits, like, there's these, there's a difference between forging a community and kind of forcing a community. So, like, you can have these kind of affinity groups and think of it as a community, but that's not really a community. That's just people who give it a certain level, have a certain capacity, but, like, their why might not be at all the same. So when you're trying to build communities, for us, there are people who know us through a particular program and are very wed to that program, and very much like that is what we are. There are other people who know us through an entirely different set of circumstances and know us as an entirely different thing. And they might not mix. There was a great, I can't remember which book it was from, but Kurt Vonnegut, I think, had this term called a grand falloon, which was like a meaningless association of people. And it was kind of like poking fun at, like, the folks with the pointy hats and those types of community organizations of, like, the 50s and 60s and that kind of mindset, but in that kind of gentle Vonnegut way. But, like, when we're building, like, a community and it's shared, we all bring meaning to it. So not sure if I've addressed your question, but it's just.
No, I love it. That's okay. No, and I think you bring up a really good point that different people come into a community potentially for different reasons. And I think that's kind of what make real community building really tricky, is that one person can come in for this reason and another person for this way. How do you find a place for shared vision while also acknowledging very different lived experiences, different reasons for participating? That I think is the trickiest thing I personally have found with community building. And
a lot of it comes from how, like, so our approach, I mean, my approach comes from, I had a great colleague named Kim Winchell in a previous role that I had at a United Way, and she would talk about ABCD community development, so asset-based community development. And, it's not to dehumanize people, but people come with as assets and with assets, and there are communities that have assets. So it's really about strength-based and recognizing seeing people as they are and as they want to be and as they could be, and integrating that, in that kind of collaborative way that was spoken about earlier.
Absolutely. Prathyush, what would you add to this piece? That, we're talking kind of into, like, some mindsets and practices. And there's also, like, some of those traditional hierarchies that I don't know that they're always serving nonprofits that well when we have those hierarchies in place too. What would you add to this?
Yeah, I think definitely the traditional hierarchies of, okay, hey, we have a program, this is what we want to do, there's a project manager, and then comes the beneficiaries or the volunteers. And the design can be done in a very smooth way when you're doing it from the top down. And it's way difficult to build for the community and build with the community, right? Like, it's a very small difference, but again, the effect is really huge. At what I've seen at UNI, the way this has worked is it's not setting up values and then building community around it, but rather building a community, observing it in action around a cause, and then identifying, hey, what are the values, right? And once you identify, distill those, you can kind of expand the community around the same. Right? So at UNI, I think two thinking, right? Like, anytime we design something for the program or make a change in the program, there are two people asking questions. One, of course, the program had saying, hey, is this benefiting the children? And of course, we have the community building specialist who's asking, hey, does this make sense for the community, right?
Yeah.
And you need both of these people to kind of have a conversation, and both of these need to be thought through, right? Like when we build with community very much within the picture, rather than thinking about, hey, you know what, like we have a great cause and we want to bring a community together, and then we'll make the community do what we want them to for the cause, right? So it kind of, the interplay of it is very crucial. And I think it has to be built together, right? Like you need people looking out for the beneficiaries, of course, interests of the beneficiaries, what do they need? And at the same time, people looking out for the community, right? Like how do we engage them, enable them, train them, in fact, to do the work that we want them to do.
And I know we're not really talking in depth. This conversation wasn't meant to be about volunteers and volunteer engagement, but, you know, volunteers are often a very strong piece of a nonprofit community itself, right? You know, often equivalently important to members, staff, you know, the people you're serving. Like there is so many groups at a nonprofit to, you know, like they're all stakeholders. And then you have the people that we often call our stakeholders, which are the donors and your board. But those are only one portion, right, of what the community can be. And often we're not even folding those individuals into the community all that well. They're somehow slightly outside the community, but they have a stake in the community. It's, you know, it's very, very hard, I think, to satisfy all of those different audiences. And I think that's why sometimes making the plan for a community, it does require some flexibility and some constant reassessment. It's probably not here's where our community is, you know, here's the next 5 years of planning for our community. I think that's too long, right? It's like if we stuck to something for 5 years, I don't know if we would end up getting there, but maybe a vision for 5 years is reasonable, but we have to be open to the path that we take to get there.
Yeah,
all
expanding
right.
on what you said earlier, I think it's the ecosystem view, right? Like we're building an ecosystem rather than a machine. And ecosystems, while it can be difficult to get them started, get them running, but they're often self-maintaining and self-healing, right? Like they continue to kind of self-iterate and then continue moving forward. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. I love this, guys. This is great. And comments coming in from people, fab, so great. I think it's, you know, just love the spots everyone's going on this. So I'm going to bring in our next question here. And I feel like this is a bit of a big one because, you know, there's a bit of a saying where people come for the cause, but stay for the community. And I think that's never been more true. And it doesn't apply just to donors, but that's, again, the volunteers, whether your board decides to stay on, whether your internal staff, you know, decide to stay on. Oh, sorry. I think the people coming for the cause and staying for the community is real. And I'm seeing a lot of that, but I'm going to go first to Jared, but what have you found most effective in turning, you know, sometimes short-term supporters into those longer-term community members and advocates?
Yeah, wow, that's such a great question and a huge question.
It's a huge
snacks
question.
always help. You need food. Yeah. It's funny. So we, yeah, my mind's going like a million different directions. I was thinking of like when you're, as someone put, you know, meeting people where they're at, like a lot of times it's making them feel seen and known. And so there's some technical things that you can do, and then there are some just human things you can do. So, I mean, I sort of jokingly say snacks, but like knowing what, you know, people eat, or if they have an allergy, or if, you know, certain days of the week don't work with them for cultural reasons. I mean, you can put, and everyone should put like, you know, like I'm Jewish, put your Hebrew calendar, put your Jewish calendar, your Christian calendar, your Muslim calendar, like all of these things in your Outlook, like put them all in there, because you work across the community to deal with, say, kids. You need to know, like, do folks need halal meals? Do they, are they vegetarian? Do they, you know, have certain restrictions or other things? And that's just kind of like a good courtesy, but it's not just that. It's making people feel seen and known. And if they don't have to constantly remind you, they know that they're seen and known as who they are. So if they have to go, oh, I can't, it's you know, it's a Saturday, I don't go out on a Saturday, or it's a Friday, I'm in prayers at this time, or any of these things that become a barrier. And it's on them maybe once, but it's on us after that to recognize and see people and value that, their assets and what they bring to the community. And if you're not seeing people, you're putting up barriers. So that's the kind of like what we can do side of things. And then you can't force time. So that short term to long term, like we deal with youth, it's going to take 18 years every single time for a kid to be 18 years old. Like it's just full stop. Like they might seem older or other things, but like, that some things just, they naturally take time, and you can push as hard as you want. You're not moving the revolution of the earth around the sun any quicker. So give space to that. Let that relationship grow at its pace. Be there when people are looking for you. And don't think like short term to long term happens overnight, because that's just a night. It's not really long term. Like if you're going to think long term, invite people in. And that means, and this is the hardest thing I think for a lot of professionals in our space, is you have to show up incomplete. If you show up and you say, we're an organization that likes to collaborate, but there's no space for people to collaborate, you're just telling them what to do, you're not collaborating. If you say you're iterative and you're starting with a small sample and then you're learning, but you show up and it's a complete vision, they have no place to put themselves in that vision. It's not a shared vision, it's your vision. So what I love about the Hive is that it's a one-on-one conversation and you take it where you want it to go. That's kind of, you can see where it goes. It's an ecosystem, as was mentioned earlier, that the Hive, that metaphor, that kind of space, it allows space for discovery and for adding your own voice to it. If you're not doing that, you're doing a different project.
I don't even know where to start with all of the beautiful things you just said there, because at first I was like, oh, I should respond with something about CRMs, which I know, Jared, you and I have talked about, like the power of data in fundraising and so many of those conversations, because you gave some brilliant highlights on, and someone else had said in here, Alexis, there's listening, there's asking the right questions of our community, and not necessarily in a survey. Not that I want to say surveys are not worthwhile, because they are, but I do think, I've had, time with all of you. I mean, I've actually had, Prathyush, you were one of my matches at one point where I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I think you were in your car and you'd just been visiting, your mom or something like that. And I remember thinking, well, this is so cool. How often do I get to talk to somebody on the other side of the world? And I think nonprofit has a really cool opportunity to be serving people from so many different backgrounds, so many lived experiences. And we're often not grabbing onto that curiosity of going, what could our community members tell us that would actually serve them so much better than what we're already doing? And one of my friends here, Tim Turner, fellow Hive member, that seen, known, loved. I do think part of that is the seen part for sure is a critical tenet of community. And it doesn't mean that you, the nonprofit, has to always, invest to the part of knowing everybody. But I do think you should know some members of your community pretty deeply, whether you're picking and choosing between donors and volunteers, but you probably better hit all angles of knowing, that community to some degree. And then you said a whole bunch of other things, and I'm going to have to go back and we're going to have to have another conversation on this one because it was too big. It was great. It was great. Anybody else want to answer anything that Jared said before we move on? Because I know it brought up a whole bunch of pieces for me. It was great. Prathyush, I'm going to go over to you next, though, because, that's staying. And one of the things you and I talked about with You and I Trust is sometimes these mentorship relationships last and last and last, right? Between the youth and the mentors. And it sounded to me like when we talked, there was a lot more of a culture of mentorship that was existing, and You and I Trust is fostering that mentorship community.
Absolutely, right. And the statement as well is a very interesting one from the previous one. People come for the cause but stay for the community. because that's how my co-founder interviewed. That's the first statement he said when he interviewed me. And that's what kind of hooked me in as well, right? Like, hey, I want to see what's happening in this community and what does the community do. And I think when I've seen community and when I've looked at donors, volunteers, and partners, I think lowering the barrier for entry, right? Like, so for any of these people, there's never, okay, hey, only if you can do this, you're part of this community. And of course, for the longer term program that we run, of course, we need highly committed volunteers, but it's never that, okay, we turn someone away who wants to help, who wants to be part of the community. So oftentimes, like I've heard a few versions of it thrown around, fillers, feelers, pillars, right? Like a lot of the people just come in, they're just trying to fill their time. Like they have a empty afternoon, couple of hours to spare, and they want to do something, they want to do volunteering. But when you turn them away because, hey, this is only short term and I'm not able to kind of use your time wisely, so you're losing out on moving them to the next stage, right? Like taking them to a feeler, right? Like getting them to do more work, getting them to try out different things and understand what they actually want to do more of, right? And in turn, they become a pillar. They become integrated to the mentorship program. And of course, they show up in different areas, right? I think that's what I think that journey for me is what I've seen with all the partners, all the community partners, or again, like the volunteers that we work with, right? Just giving everyone something to kind of, something that they can do to the organization, to the cause. And of course, my say is simple, right? Like, hey, if you have the time, give us the time. If you don't have the time, you can always see a way if you can donate to the cause. And if you can't donate to the cause, you can always spread the word, right? Like there is no barrier to entry. And I'm not holding anything against you if you're not able to do any of the three, right? Like it's completely fine. And that's the essence of the organization, essence of the community that we're trying to build as well, right? Like we want to make it open for everyone so that they can get a taste of it. And the hope is we're able to inspire them to do more rather than trying to get, okay, hey, right now I have you in the room, so I'm going to get the most out of you and get my needs met, right? So I think that's one of the way I look at, and often it's also giving back to the community that comes to us, right? Like each of these, like donors, volunteers, and partners, they all have their very specific needs, right? Volunteers are often coming in for volunteering, and we're able to tell them, hey, we're able to give them the opportunities to lead, right? Like if they're committing more time, we're able to give them opportunities to lead. We're giving them recognition, and at the same time, what's crucial is for them to be effective leaders. It's a lot of upskilling, right? So it's something that will help them even beyond the work that they do within the social cause, that they can take to their professional lives or their college lives, whatever they're going through, right? So, and same for the donors, right? Like a lot of the institutional donors have a lot of their own pain points. And again, as someone who's that's welcoming us to the community, we find out how can we engage their employees in the same community that we work with, right? How can we engage them, give them a taste of what the organization is supporting, just giving them just that sense of transparency through and through. I think that has really helped us turn like short-term supporters into community members, advocates per se. Yeah.
I love that. One thought I had, and I think I said this before, maybe not out to the general public, but I know there are lots, you will read many articles saying clean that email list, clean the list. If someone hasn't opened it and how long, if they haven't engaged, remove them. And partly maybe that's due to some email platforms charged by the number of contacts you have, which I think is not correct. But, you know, I had to get past when I first started this nonprofit Hive community, the idea that some people show up for 4 to 5 weeks straight and then disappear for 2 months. And it's hard not to get in your head sometimes as a community builder, as someone that you're passionate about this cause, this work. But like you're saying, sometimes timing is everything, right? Timing can be everything. And community requires, I think, a level of flexibility and openness, inclusivity, accessibility that we're sometimes ignoring when we put it down to metrics of you have to do it like this, otherwise you don't fit the community, right? And that would mean, you know, half of our Hive members, if I put a hard stop saying you have to participate once every 4 weeks, that wouldn't work, right? It would work for some of our members really well, but that would not be serving them. And we've had people who, now that we're almost at 2 years, they show up once every 6 months and they are hard in because this is the season where they can be really engaged, and then they're out again. And that, I think that is sometimes something that is, it seems to fly in the face of what we think of when we think of community, because often we're talking about these hyper engaged individuals create the community. But I think those people who we call them lurkers, although we need a better name for it because that doesn't sound very kind. But those sometimes are the people who are advocating for you behind closed doors that we don't know are talking positively about us because I wasn't able to mentor this time with you and I trust. But man, I got a lovely email back from them. They invited me to come back anytime when I do have more time. That message sometimes means just as much as the volunteer opportunity could have been, right? Absolutely. Joana, what are you seeing that's making people stay when it comes to Sustainable Agriculture Network? Like, what is that piece that's not them just showing up, but like converting them into longer term community members?
Yeah, well, I think a really important aspect to bear in mind is really how we see ourselves. So the purpose, so sustainable agriculture is at the center, not a specific organization, not the secretariat, not one of the members. And so given that this shared purpose, the cause, is at the center of the diagram, if we imagine one, it's much, much easier to then engage and bring everybody along to contribute. Something else that's very interesting would be the fact that the members ultimately, they need to perceive some sort of gain from this interaction. And so the more we can value their time, their contribution, the more we can actually make it clear that they're having concrete impact, the more they're going to contribute following up. So it's this incremental process that builds up on previous successes. And that's what we've seen really clearly at Sustainable Agriculture Network. If we are able to position the value that we are creating together in a more appealing way, then people will consistently show up.
Yeah. Consistency. I'm going to be that obnoxious marketer because I am not a viral marketer. I am a consistency marketer. And I would say, it's so annoying, and I understand everyone wants the fast track. How can we build community for 2 weeks from now? Those are not the communities that I'm seeing find long-term success, right? And I know these are 3 nonprofit organizations who have been around for a long time. Maybe people who are listening that are at newer nonprofits, this feels daunting to think about what it takes to build a community. But I do think, that consistency, that incremental piece is the reality of what it takes often to build community. So, okay, we're moving on to our last question. And I did see Tim Turner that has a question here, and I will bring that in before we finish, I promise. Thank you so much for all the beautiful comments. I was going to say, I see my friend Matt Zager in here. There will be no requirements ever for the nonprofit Hive to show up a certain amount. I absolutely promise, because that would not work for the majority of you, and I totally understand that. So, Prathyush, we're going to go back to you to start off on this question. But, if we were going to really start prioritizing community and making this part of our strategy, what would be your one thing you would say to those like listening from nonprofits? What's that like? What do we need to change? Oh, I think you're muted, my friend.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, what I was saying was, I think the community health needs to be a core outcome whenever we think of taking account at the end of the year, right? Like when we often think of impact reports, measuring the impact, but oftentimes community health is something that's ignored or not consciously thought about. And how do you do that, right? Like how can we get that done? So I think that's the key change that I feel like is very important for us to see. And of course, like, I think there is no replacement for being genuine, right? Like it's not something you can engineer. It's not something you can plan for or create a framework for. So that always helps. And of course, building, you said that earlier, right? Like people come for the cause, but stay for the community. But again, once we have that community, we need to start building with community in the center. Right?
Yeah.
Like it can't be, hey, what I want to do is what I want to do. I'll see how to get the community to do it. No, but rather, okay, hey, this is the community and these are the community's strengths. And then kind of building strategies surrounding that, right? So I feel like community health is the key, right? Like I think oftentimes no one looks at that. And for us, it's been paying attention to the attendances, right? Like especially the volunteer attendance, like when the teacher attendances, are they missing out, skipping out on classes? Are they struggling with anything? Is there a trend that we can see in that perspective? And we work with donors and partners. We send out surveys at the end of the year just to assess, okay, hey, was there any lags in the way we worked with you? And again, a lot of check-ins that we do with them throughout the year, at least quarterly, right? Like when we work with larger institutional donors. And of course, for employees, it's just the times that we get together, work together, and a lot of the getaways that are often seen as, hey, for nonprofits, isn't it an unnecessary expense? But rather, it's an investment back into the community, right? Like where people, all of them are coming together, realigning, getting energy off of each other as well. So I think invest in community and treat community health as a outcome that you're working towards. So yeah.
I think that's great. I've heard of a couple organizations really focusing in on quarterly impact reporting versus at the end of the year. And not only does that sometimes take less work to gather things for a quarterly report, it also helps with some of that continued engagement for not only your team to see what impact you've created in the last, 3 months, but also for your community to go, look at what happened. And if they didn't participate in the last quarter, what did they maybe miss out on contributing? Or if they did contribute, look at what you helped create, right? Like I think there's that feedback loop you're talking about in investment is really, really important. Joana, what would you say, how could we reprioritize? What would we change to make community that priority for nonprofits?
I believe that there must be a stronger emphasis on decentralization ultimately. So letting go. And as we were saying before, realizing that if we are collaborating, we are incomplete. I really like that. And we need to establish space for actual conversations. So if there's one particular member, individual, entity that is better suited to take on a specific role, then in the case of SEN, of Sustainable Agriculture Network, the Secretariat might not even be involved, because we understand that it will work out naturally. So I would definitely say the centralization and communication, definitely. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that organic piece to community is something we don't always let, naturally flourish in the community, that organic interest and support. Jared, what would you end to this? Where's the place for opportunity with community as a strategy?
I think of a couple things depending on where you are within the nonprofit space. So if you're a fundraiser, the one big change I would say is, if you ever use the phrase "my donor," don't use the phrase "my donor." They're not your donor. My thinking, like I've got kids that are now teens, but it from the toddler age. Mine. It goes back to that shared kind of thing. Like it's not a my thing. We need to be a community by being a community, not having that power dynamic of my donor, not your donor, and all the things that get implied. But if you're talking just more as an organization, so not just specific to fundraisers, it's like simple old world kind of stuff, like know your neighbor, know your neighborhood, know those around you. I worked at a national charity before this current one, and so it was a Canadian Red Cross. And one of the things we did with corporate partners was we would do this missing map project. And I'm using this kind of concrete example because Manitoba, we just had a bunch of, we're still going through really bad fires. And one of the things when you come in and you want to try to help evacuate people, like even in Canada, in northern parts of my province, we have areas that were not named through a lot of corporate partners who would go through and like name spaces. It wasn't like, what's the official name on the government, website for the road? It's what do people who live there call it? How do people reference things? So knowing what things are called, how they're referenced, makes a big difference when you're in an emergency situation and you're trying to communicate. Just where are people at? Like someone said, meet people where they're at. Like you have to know where people are at is called. So like there are these really big opportunities. I actually thought about this story when the fire started and reached back out to my former colleague to say thanks to some of those corporate partners I worked with, because I know that the impact of that seemed really wishy-washy. Like, why are we doing this for an hour and why are we naming these things? But like sometimes those little things have such a big ripple effect, and people made a difference that don't even know it. So getting to know your neighborhood as an organization, getting to know who works alongside of you. I love connector spaces. Like Canada, we have 211. Like if someone comes into our agency and we don't have an answer, we have a connector. We can call 211, get them on there, because usually someone's challenge isn't singular. There are a number of different things going on. So when you know your neighbor and you know the assets in your neighborhood and you work with partners, it all starts from knowing each other. Like it really does. And like knowing each other as valuable to know, and you never know when you're going to have that need. I love what you said about, people coming and going within the Hive space, because I'm so guilty of that. But like, I mean, you don't know that like, we had a plumbing issue and we're dealing with pipes or it just we have an event coming up or other things. It has nothing to do with like, I feel I'm missing when I'm not getting to a Hive thing, but like when I can make it, this is really great. Right. So
absolutely.
A bit of a ramble, but yeah, I think the things we can change really are like how we approach others and getting to know them.
I think it's great. And Trent jumped in here on the comments talking about like a lot of orgs don't reflect the themes of community. And I'm not saying that you should if you don't have a community. Like that's not necessary, right? Like don't just throw the word community on it, but not actually have that be of value of your organization. It doesn't have to be. Community is not the end all be all. I'm sure many of you are joining because it is either something you're cultivating, already have, are continuing to work towards. Community is not a necessity for nonprofit, but I do think it is a strategy for nonprofit, but we need to treat it with that same care we might put into fundraising strategy or marketing strategy. It is tied to those pieces, but it is still somehow separate, right? It is not. So thanks for bringing that up, Trent. I thought that was really
it's helpful. Like a tool in the toolkit, to Trent's point, right? Like, so, what's the old line? Like, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, like sometimes you got to step back and go, well, maybe I need to get a new tool. So maybe I need to reach out to someone who, deals with, wrenches or screwdrivers or other things, right? Like, or word processing or whatever. Like, so sometimes it's, it's not your area. It doesn't mean it's not your problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go back to this. This was our last question. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. I know we're already getting close to a few minutes over. I love this question because I'm super curious to hear what all three of you think on this, of what comes first. And I think I would have initially said, I thought when I started the Hive, like community came first, but I think there's an ecosystem feedback loop part to it that I actually think, when I look back on it, the people came first. There were people I wanted to be in community with that I saw shared. For me, the Hive was the values of nonprofit work is hard and we need each other. And I found those other humans. And then the community came out of those conversations. But I'm not, that's just me. What would, Joanna, what would you say? People first or community? Like what's the direction you've seen?
Oof, that's a tough question. I am going to escape the difficulty and say both.
Okay.
I really find that it's a co-creation process, and so the residents who are identified and we identify with, that we want to have that relationship with, create a community, which in turn strengthens those individual bonds. So I would say it's definitely connected.
Very much, very much. Prathyush, what would you say? I don't know if there's a right answer here by any stretch.
Absolutely right. I think I would take a similar approach to Joanna, right? Like rather than saying both, what I would say is start with people first, right? And as you scale, you put the community first. So both in a way, but when do you do it matters.
Yeah, I was going to say great comments coming in from Tyrone. Paolo here. Jared, what would you say? I don't think there's a right answer here, but
No, then that's okay. We don't have to
Yeah.
fixate on that part. Like, I think for the Hive, like where you started off on that discussion, Tasha, to me, like the void came first, like seeing that there was this absence, something was missing, and that was the aha kind of moment. But like, I wonder in that original question if what comes first, if that was like an order thing or a prioritizing kind of thing. So if it comes first in terms of priority, I mean, I would agree. I think that it's people first, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because you have to start with essentially self in a way, or with others in your known community. And like, if you have that base, you can kind of build out. But there's a reason that we talk a lot about self-care and being able to, like, you know, if the oxygen mask falls on the plane, put your own first before your kid. It's really hard sometimes to want to put others second when it's your kids, but yeah, there is something to starting with people, and I would extend that to the, like, if it's a priority question, it's hard, but you got to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is great. I'm not going to keep you over time. Joana is on her first day of vacation and joining us for this, which is wild. Thank you so much. And it's evening for 2 of our members who are joining us today. So I'm going to respect their time. Thank you all so much. This was a joy, and my internet stopped being flaky, which I am so thankful for, because I think this is when people are reaching out to me asking about community, it is such a challenging, the questions they're asking for, they're looking for simple answers, and community is complex, and it's not just jumping in with a circle network, or, it's not as simple as an email series. Like, community is really challenging. And so I think you guys all did a brilliant job. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to everybody who jumped in on the comments. Thanks, guys. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.